Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. My name is Mompoloki Lerumo Mogobe. Our objective is to enthuse, inspire, energize, and empower entrepreneurs and entrepreneurs of all stripes here in BW and beyond. We do so by inviting these entrepreneurs into our makeshift studio. Sometimes we call them to the restaurant, sometimes we go to our studio, and we ask them to share their experiential knowledge, their experiences and their expertise. And we ask them as many questions as we can, aimed at empowering you also as a viewer. A big hello and welcome indeed to another invigorating, inspiring episode of Mogobe Nuggets of Wisdom podcast. As you can see me smiling broadly because I have a very familiar guest. By that I mean someone I've known for decades, quite literally. Former tenant, friend, and also a renowned businessman in the country. We're going to talk about issues of ethical entrepreneurship, but let me give him a chance to introduce himself. Welcome, Mr. Dumi Lopang. But maybe before you even talk, let me just ask the viewer to please strike that subscribe button. We need your support. Please, it's absolutely essential. Welcome to Mogobe Nuggets.
Thank you very much. Finally.
Yes, we've been trying to get you here for some time.
Yes, thank you very much for the invitation.
Can you take the opportunity to just introduce yourself and tell the viewer, share a condensed CV about yourself?
Okay. So I'm born to a Botswana father and a Zimbabwean mother. Mm-hmm. So my father was studying in Zimbabwe and married a Zimbabwean woman. So I was actually born in Zimbabwe.
Where?
In a border town called Plumtree.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
And then my father moved back to Botswana when I was 6 months and he settled in Silibepikwe. Mm-hmm. So Silibepikwe is what I consider home here. I went to primary school there. And then for my high schooling, I went back to Zimbabwe. I went to school in Bulawayo called Christian Brothers College, a Catholic school. And then from there, I went to University of Cape Town, which is where I met Pesira Dikadi. Whilst in university myself, Mwatludi Lekaukau and the late Matata Kasenele started a business. It was 1995, so South Africa transitioned to democracy. So a lot of the previous brands that were white brands, like Levi Jeans, etc., they were looking to penetrate this new black market that had been freed. So we basically did events on campuses, basically marketing and promoting these brands and connecting them with black youth. After that, I went back to Pikwe. My sponsor was a businessman, Indian businessman from Pikwe. He had paid for my A-levels and university, so I had to go serve a bond. So I went to Pikwe and I worked for 1 year, 1998. And then I got a call from Pesi to say, listen, we've just been awarded a radio station license and I think you'd be the perfect first sales and marketing manager. I saw what you did in Cape Town, So I spoke to my sponsor who was gracious enough to say, yeah, man, this is an amazing opportunity. He released me and I moved to Gaborone in May of 99. And then the station went on air in August of 99 and I was its inaugural sales and marketing manager.
Also a director, right? Or
no, not a shareholder, just an employee.
No, at that time.
At that time, yeah. And then in end of 2002, Percy left to go join he was my boss. He went to join the corporate world. And then I became acting station manager. And then in May of 2003, I was appointed station manager. And then in 2006-07, the majority shareholder was in a bit of trouble. They owed the bank money. And myself and a few of the existing shareholders who wanted to stay on board and the new team, we then bought the majority stake. So that's when I then became a shareholder in 2007. And then I ran Yarona FM until the end of 2010, when by then we had formed a...
Were you also managing director?
Yes, I was. And then in 2010, we had come up with a strategy basically to diversify from just radio. And we bought an advertising agency, then the largest in Botswana. which Matata Kasenele used to be MD of. And from there, we moved into outdoor advertising, PR, then later print, then diversified out of Botswana into Zambia, and now we have in TV as well. Yeah, and today here I am sitting with Mogobe.
That's very interesting. The academic side, what were you studying exactly in Cape Town?
I was studying a BCom, and really, how I chose it was I used to see adverts in the Sunday Times for chartered accountants, newly qualified, and I wanted to become a CA. I had good enough marks, from school that I could do anything, including being a doctor, but I think I was afraid of blood.
Yeah.
But I didn't finish my degree. I think and I don't say this in a romantic way that people say, entrepreneurs like Richard Branson. I mean, I think it was just lack of discipline, really. I think as our business really took off, I would drop off Makrudi and Matata on campus, and they would go for lectures, and I'd go and run the business. Yeah. and Makrudi became a chartered accountant because that's how we met. And my wife. Yeah. We met at varsity. We were all at BCom, so we'd share certain lectures. Yeah. And so
it's interesting.
So I was studying a BCom, but never completed it.
Yeah. You suggested that you got an Indian sponsor who took you, an Indian gentleman who sponsored you. How did that happen? Is this something you're willing to share?
Yeah, but I think it's an important aspect of my journey. So I had a friend of mine. We'd been in primary school together. The father was a businessman in Pico. He had worked for the mine, but had set up a number of businesses. And from primary school, he used to work in the afternoons in their shop where they sold spare parts. They had a filling station. They sold spare parts as well. And he'd work there. But I started joining him when we were in high school in Form 1. He would go when he's on holidays. He'd spend half a day working there. And then in the afternoon, we would hang out.
Were you just a volunteer?
No, I'd go there just to hang with him. I'd stand, he'd be working, and I'd be standing. Then the father, Mr. Chatley, said to me, but listen, you're spending half a day here. Why don't you earn some money at least? Yeah. So I said, why not? Nice pocket money. So from Form 1, from working just like spending half a day, I went to working throughout the holidays. I'd work the entire holidays, make some nice pocket money, and then go to school. And that's where practically I learned business from this Indian businessman here. And we went and did our Form 4 exams in Zimbabwe. O levels are in Form 4. And so the results come out, and he's like, so to me, how did you do? The son, I think, had gotten, maybe 6 A's, a couple of B's or something. Yeah. And I tell him, I got 9 A's, so I got straight 6, 9 A's and a 2B. Yeah, oh, wow. So he was shocked. His reaction was like, oh, wow. Wow, you're quite smart. It's like, no, so let me sponsor you for A levels. What do you want to become as a chartered accountant? He said, yeah, good. Because he used to have Indian chartered accountants running. He said, no, so become a CA, then you can come in and help your friend, as he's head of finance. So that's what, that's how my journey in terms of understanding business is practical. It's not textbook. It comes from learning. And we've seen that community, the Jews do it, the Indians do it. They involve their children in the business from a young age. And then the kids learn on the job, and that's why it then becomes intergenerational.
Yeah. That's good. So what I'm interested in is what attracted you to business, because it seems to me that you could have easily walked away, but you chose to stay those afternoons. What was it that really pulled you to entrepreneurship? I don't think it was just money.
No. My first thing, when I was in standard 2, I was selling kittens. Not even Dinjanyana. Hey. I had some, I don't know where I had gotten the kittens from. I had kittens at my house, and some friends came to play. And kind of the litter is, they like 9, 10, so they're like, and I think I gave a friend, when back at school, the friend told other friends that, hey man, I got this really cute kitten from Dumi. And guys were asking, let me make a little bit of pocket money. That's in standard 2. In later years, I'd get into selling dogs as well, etc. And then I think just working for Mr. Chatley, the whole concept of buying something for X amount, you then put so much in terms of markup and you sell it, just fascinated. And I could see the results, that through this process and understanding the difference between turnover and profit and how they negotiate, like how they price. You come in and you negotiate, you think you've got a good deal. But that's already worked in because you've already anticipated what that just fascinates me, the psychology behind it, And then that at the end of the day, you sort of determine your own future.
One thing when we're prepping for this, you mentioned is that you think of business as a calling or entrepreneurship as a calling. Why have you come to think of it like that?
I've come to think of it like that as I've developed, and grown, especially in my faith or in my spirituality, where I've looked and said, what are things that influence society or culture? And this is not something I've come up with, it's there are some people who have written books about this, what they call the 7 mountains of influence or the 7 spheres of influence, things that can change culture. And those 7 include entrepreneurship, they include arts and culture, they include media, governance, they include religion, they include education. So in this, I then understood that if you take these 7 things and you study society from all the way back, regardless of which country it is in, those have played a major role in shaping people's minds and shaping society and community. So if you then with that understanding that you can shape and influence society through business, you then understand that being driven by money or saying I want to work for myself is not enough. There are many people who do that but don't succeed.
Yes.
But if you understand the unique space that you can, as a successful entrepreneur, fill in terms of society, job creation, contributing to the fiscus through tax on whatever, for the development of roads. If you look at it like that, you then understand that you have been set apart or set aside for this particular road. You could have been a doctor, you could have been a teacher, but that this is where you are. And it's funny, something that I did just before I got married was something that when we went for marital counseling, the pastor, who was my wife's pastor, made me do a gifts test. And this is like a set of about 70 questions. I guess very similar to a psychometric.
Yeah.
Because it's
psychometric test.
Yeah. In how you answer these questions, you get a conclusion at the end. And this conclusion says, these are your areas of strength. And it confirmed what I already knew. Number one, that entrepreneurship, not only that I've got this gift or to go into the continent. And she was saying it's important that as you are getting married, your future wife understands this, so that she doesn't say, do you Ethiopia. She understands right from the beginning.
Yes.
So that she says, no, I'm not willing to sign up for this.
Yeah.
Number 2, that I have got a strong pastoral calling. Or buruti. And it's funny because growing up, I had always wanted to become a Catholic priest. We were raised Catholic. Always. That's why I even went to a Catholic high school. The plan was that after A-levels, I'd go to seminary, and this is what I had always wanted.
Is it?
But yeah, I think certain things, I realized I wouldn't be able to uphold all the things.
So the way the calling manifests, it's not like there's a deep voice that sips in and says, Dumi, you're going to become an entrepreneur, or a big voice from the top. How does a calling shape itself, if you know what I mean?
It shapes itself in that it's something that comes naturally to you. Something that when people ask you, but how did you know? You cannot, people have invited me to come and speak at events and give us the 10 points the 10 nuggets.
Yes.
Or that can make you a successful entrepreneur. And I say I'm the wrong guy.
Yeah.
All I can do is maybe share my journey. And in there probably those who are smarter than me can pick nuggets from that.
Yeah.
And there are certain universal principles that you and I as business people know apply. So this thing it's something that you innately do and enjoy without even thinking about it,
Yeah.
And then somebody then defines it and calls it entrepreneurship or that you're a businessman,
And I've had a serial entrepreneur who sometimes says he thinks of his businesses as if they're children, his children. Who are your current children, as it were, in this context? What are you nurturing? What are you working on? What are these businesses you are cultivating currently?
So, we started off with Yarona FM, and then from there we, like I said, we moved out of broadcasting, went into communications agencies, which we grew that, went into print, newspaper, Echo, and then a TV station, and then radio as well, and in Zambia, etc. What we have done, funny enough, since COVID, is to actually, to borrow a saying made famous by Rekwala Gobi, which is from the Bible, Jeremiah, is to go back to the crossroads.
Yeah, you mentioned this at the funeral of
Masir.
Yeah.
We did that as a business. We sat down and introspected. I've got 3 other partners in our group and said, guys, let's go back and focus on broadcasting. This is what we know. This is what we are passionate about. The other businesses were opportunities that we looked at, but we're not really passionate about. So at the moment, it's really the 2 radio stations, Yarona and Phoenix FM in Zambia, the TV station YTV, and we've got an outdoor company called YMH Outdoor, which we are about
it's
to
an advertising.
It's outdoor company.
Outdoor, okay.
Yeah, we are about to diversify and invest quite a bit into digital billboards, moving away from the steel structures. And the aim really is in Zambia to consolidate, move into TV there, and then we've got opportunities in a few SADC countries to invest in TV and in radio as well. So I think going forward, those are sort of the 3 areas: digital advertising or digital billboards, radio, and TV. And then TV is obviously it's continuously changing to on-demand content, like what you are doing.
Yes.
Growing, and I think we will use the TV as a platform to move into on-demand content in the future.
Yeah, I met you when you became my tenant a decade and a half ago, where you had a call center. What became of the call center?
No, it's still there. Yeah, we bought the call center in 2007. Yeah, so that's. Yeah.
I see you didn't mention it.
Yeah, you see, because I deal in property as well, so I've got small side hustles, and I consider the call center a side hustle. My main focus is really our media group, and then really trying to grow that. But yes, I've got the call center as well, and it's important.
Orinoco, I think.
Yes, Orinoco. It's important in that it employs a lot of young people. I believe that we are trying hard to fill a gap because a lot of young graduates are coming out with degrees and are not able to get employment. And we
There was a time when you seem to have about 200-300.
Yes,
crazy numbers.
Excuse me.
In one of our properties.
Yes. So it's an important sector, and I think BPO is a sector that I know government has really been trying to grow because one of the things guys will tell you is that Botswana have a neutral accent. How we ask, your accent is neutral. You can hear when you speak to someone that's a Nigerian, that's a Zambian, that's a South African. Botswana, they will tell you that we have a neutral accent. What does that mean? It means that you can set up a call center in Botswana for Bank of America or for Barclays Bank or for whoever. And when people call in, they won't struggle. There was a time when one of the banks here outsourced their call center to India. It was a disaster. Trying to get your statement or your credit card. And then they brought it back in country. So I think it's a sector that really, and I know BITC are really trying hard to grow it and make us more competitive so that we can really, like you said, one small company like Orinoco, 300 people. Imagine if the sector was supported, we could really get thousands of people into jobs.
How was it penetrating the Zambian market? Is it a difficult market to penetrate?
Not really. I think moving into Zambia when we did in 2013, we went to see the station in 2012. We'd heard it's for sale, end of 2012. Even that, the way it happened, I got a phone call from somebody who had been to Botswana, and I had met him in, I think, 2006. Once he called me to say, Dumi, are you still in radio? I said, yes. Do you still have this vision of going into the continent? I said, yes. He said, I'm now based in Zambia. There's a station for sale. So we went and saw it. And what we saw, I know some South African business had been there to look. And they thought,
they dismissed it.
Yeah. But what we saw was potential. Because we remembered the humble beginnings that Yarona FM started with when we were on Kaunda Road.
Yes.
They were there. In 2012, they were literally Yarona FM in 99. So it was easy because it meant we don't have to reinvent the wheel to a certain extent.
Had proof of concept.
Absolutely. And all I did is Owen, who was running our business here, we took him there for 6 months. I said, just study the nuances of this particular market because we don't want to come in with a big brother know-it-all mentality. Study 6 months. He just sat there, July 2013 to January 2014. Understanding the market, meeting advertisers, meeting listeners, going to other radio stations, meeting advertising agencies. And then we said, right, January 2014, we kicked off. We changed their programming format and introduced things which were new to the market, but we had done here and seen working over a number of years. So it wasn't that difficult.
Is the size of the population there an advantage?
Absolutely. So people will say, but you're going to Zambia, they say only 10% of the population is middle to high, income. But 10% of their population, if you take 10% of their population, it's currently it's probably about 1.8 million. That's nearly the whole of Botswana.
Yeah, it is.
So even if, yes, as a percentage of their total population, it's still a sizable figure. Yeah. And majority of those people are in Lusaka. We've got a quasi-national license in that we're in Lusaka and about 6 other provinces, but we are in the key
Livingston,
No, we are not.
Yeah.
We've been trying for a Livingston. They release licenses in batches.
No, I see.
Yes,
so it's difficult to penetrate. All right. Now, I want us to talk about ethics in business because that is really the thrust of our conversation today. Why is it important to talk about ethics in business? Why does business need to be ethical?
I think it's important because I believe when business is not ethical or business people are not ethical, their entire environment gets contaminated and becomes unethical, and then it permeates to other sectors in the economy. I remember back in the days when people would talk of corruption, they would be mentioned that you can't win certain big tenders in government if you don't have connections, etc., or you can't get this land if you don't have connections. And nowadays, you will hear from your sales reps that I went to company X to get adverts, because that's how we survive from selling advertising space on our platforms. And the person the marketing manager, whoever is in charge of placing adverts, asks also, what are you saying? Back in the days, people would be shocked if I said, if I'm caught speeding in Botswana, I wouldn't even know what even to start saying because they use cold drink language or whatever in other places. I wouldn't even know what to say. I'd be so scared because the cops don't even think of that. Can we say that still pertains today? So what happens is that generally it starts with business people, and there's the corrupt and the corrupted. And we always talk about the corrupted, but we forget the corrupted. The corrupted is generally a businessman who's looking for something in that particular, whether it's a business or it's in government, or etc.
An opportunity.
Now, when the people who do business ethically don't speak out, people think the norm is to do business in an unethical way. But there are a lot of people who do, and they struggle. So what we need to do is we need to go back to making doing business the ethical way the norm. Not where when you talk about people say, taipona, you're going to take long, or tahumanagala ruri.
Yeah, that kind of talk.
That type of talk. Because it's now become the norm for you to have connections and to do things in a certain way. So it contaminates the environment. And when the environment is contaminated, nothing succeeds. Botswana has always been a shining example, because whenever Transparency International does they'll say least corrupt or second least corrupt country in the, and that attracts foreign direct investment, because there are companies that are listed in the New York Stock Exchange and etc. When they move into a space, it's very important that the governance structures are important, because back at the New York Stock Exchange, they can get in trouble. So even in terms of when we talk FDI, having an environment where people are ethical and there's the rule of law and governance and there's a respect for it attracts foreign direct investment, in that people want to operate in an environment where they know it's a meritocracy. It's not about who you know. So I think that's why talking about it and giving examples of times when one has held out, and in the long run the benefit has come, and I think those of us who try, we are not perfect, who try, should meet up with other people who try and encourage each other
and make a lot of noise about it.
Absolutely.
Talk about it.
Absolutely.
When do you think that things started going wrong, and what could have been the catalyst?
I've got my own theories in terms of the period.
Was it nakwahara masira or nakwahara mukhai or nakwahara kama, or it's just now nakwahara masis?
No, I would say where the thing came to the forefront would have been during the presidency of Rekhama. And why I say that typically is because I'm sure corruption was there, but it would have been maybe covert. I think it's during this time where overtly you would see wealth being splashed, and a lot of the people were not entrepreneurs who you can track the record. It was quickly gained wealth from normally dealing with government, and in particular, say, the intelligence services, etc. So you found that a lot of people, if you try to find out, this guy's got a lot of, what is it? You find that there would always be this talk about that they are sourcing stuff, or they've gotten stuff, or they're supplying things, and So I think probably it's during that time that it was now overtly visible when you looked around and you tried to find out, but who's this person? And there's no track record that you can find out.
And wasn't there a long debate around the issue of declaration of assets as well, which debate still remains unresolved, which if it had been resolved, perhaps things would have turned out differently? I don't know.
Possibly. What I've learned about the human being is that they always find ways around. So you need to also, when you put in boundaries and things, checks and balances, those must also always evolve as well, because those who are on the other side are always constantly finding new ways to get around that. But I think, yes, that's one of the ways, because so that people in public service can account. I believe if there are certain examples around the world that one can look at, and a lot of us talk about Singapore, right?
Singapore, Dubai, places like
that. If you look at Singapore, number one, you come in as a minister. First time you're always going to be a junior minister. You serve 2 terms as a junior minister. You've learned the ropes of governance, working in the public service space. 2 terms. Then in your 3rd term, yes, now you can be elevated to a full minister, because you are tried and tested. So if you have a situation where people are coming in to leadership and they're not even junior ministers, they're elevated to full ministerial roles. It's possible that you could be coming, you are maybe Mogobe, you have run your law firm, you've had subordinates, you've learned structures, systems, you've run Mogobe Inc. And you come into government, it's possible that you could succeed first time going to head a ministry. Although where us entrepreneurs struggle is because running your business and getting into public service is completely different. So even you, that's what I said, you could think, but ideally you'd want to come in as a junior minister. With a seasoned minister, you learn the ropes. But because you've been in leadership, that cycle will be quite quick. But to get somebody who has never even led Motelo, and then you elevate them into such a position, you are setting them up to failure. And I think
setting them up for failure without any sort of handrails.
Absolutely. In the past, our ministers would be there for many years. I know some people would criticize that, but what does it mean? It means you come in, you find out what the problems are in your particular ministry, you put a plan together, you start implementing, you see it working. But now when you work in 5-year cycles, when really how long it is taking you to get here.
Decades.
So I think probably in our governance model, it's good that we spoke about the 2-term limit. But this 2-term limit, look where it works arguably well. They say the US, a 200-year-old democracy. In the UK, there's none of that. Angela Merkel was there for 18 years. I think what we should do is build strong institutions so that there's no abuse. But a 5-year term, realistically, when you are still a developing nation, look at how China has managed to grow so quickly from where they were.
The last 2 decades.
Look at what they've done. But their leadership doesn't just change every so-called 2 terms. So some of these things, I understand the thinking behind it. But I think some of them we should look really and say, strengthen institutions and then give somebody a mandate, whether it's a 7-year mandate, 7-year term. Give them enough time for them not to be thinking of election to election. Because now you come in. First year, you're trying to find your feet. Second year, you're trying to implement. Third year, you are now thinking of the next elections. It's now starting to campaign for the next elections.
So, that's a challenge. Well, in that context, then I should ask you about the reset agenda, because some of the things we're lamenting now seem to have been recognized by the leadership. And the medicine that has been prescribed to the nation is this reset agenda. You remember the speech, and you also know that we now have a new ministry. They removed tertiary education. It's been replaced with entrepreneurship. What are your observations in this regard, in the context of this whole challenge? Because in the past, we've always been told our problem is one of implementation. The ideas are there, problem is implementation.
So I think the reset agenda, if you look at the points in there, make absolute sense. I don't think even the opposition would argue against that. Whether it's talking about embracing the 4th industrial revolution, whether STEM becoming at the forefront of how our education system should be, all of those things you cannot argue against. I think, but the biggest reset is going to have to be a mindset shift. And I don't know how we do that. I don't know how we do that with those who already have had their mindset molded for decades already in a certain way. They say by the time you're 21, your character has already been formed. Unless there's some divine intervention, something happens, you're born again, or generally, unless there's some major thing, or you go to jail, or something shifts you. But generally by 21. So this is what I think the focus should be. Indeed, now let's try and implement the reset agenda, changing mindsets where it's possible, showing people the opportunities that are there if you do things slightly differently. But I'm saying it's never too late. Let's start with those who are born today. Let's say, though a child who's born today, in 20 years' time, what type of child, or 18 years' time, is going to come out ready to go into the world? And let's focus on those people right now. And if we focus on that and get that right, 20 years is not a long time. We met, who knows, it's hard to believe that I've known you now for about 15 years. When we met and we moved into a building.
And a lot has happened.
A lot has happened in that time. If we start right now and focus on the child who's born today, to say, what are they coming into? How are we going to make sure that they grow up, and this mindset, this reset mindset is all they know from the beginning. I think we will probably achieve more than what you will see.
And that goes beyond just STEM, introducing STEM in education. It involves what? How do you inculcate this new mindset even at a community level? How do you do it?
So everything starts at a leadership perspective. And this is an agenda that the president has come with. He needs a cabinet who espouse those same values that he is trying to get. You need a traditional leadership that understands that a mindset, because then that goes right down to community level. But if it's only one or two people at the top who understand and get this, it's going to be extremely difficult. That's why I think you will see the frustration even in the president, where they showed a clip of him when he went out on a retreat with his ministers, and he said, I am not going to fail because of you people, my ministers. I get complaints every day. I mean, you in business, you know how getting certain permits can take for stuff where you don't understand simple things.
Yeah.
And the president says, I am not going to fail in my promises because of you, referring to his ministers and his senior team. So I think for him, that's where it needs to start, for it to cascade down. And they implemented people, their PS, the DPS, the deputy PSs, the directors, and it comes down. And I don't know whether that is something that we will be able to achieve
in our lifetime,
in the foreseeable future. And shame, I mean, the president.
But you do say 20 years can be enough.
No, absolutely. But the focus must be from the younger ones. On the current ones, I think you will get a few who you can. And there is a generation. I mean, you had my nephew on here, young Moteo.
Yes, I had him here.
Yeah. And you can see that's a different new generation who are thinking. I mean, that blows my. When I speak to him and what his dreams is like, no, I met my friends and we've agreed that no, we must give ourselves 1 year and our businesses need to be valued at $1 billion.
That kind of thinking.
That type of thinking. So there is a generation. In the meantime, that I think we can harness and take some of that, what we probably think is crazy thinking, and see how we can refine it with the wisdom of those that have come before. Because sometimes these guys are excited and they do run, but they need that hand holding. So in the meantime, also waiting for that new generation to get there. There is a group, I believe.
When you say that there's an idea which I have been sort of stress testing myself, the notion that we take the directors, permanent secretaries, and key decision makers and subject them to something as intense as the Stanford Seed program or the Gordon School of Business program, where you just, project management, project implementation, and let me just teach them those skills. And I have it as a theory in my mind that it might just work. We might just be able to pull it off. What do you think?
Absolutely. I think so. The politicians come and go, but the people generally who remain are your bureaucrats, your technocrats, your civil service, your top guys. So speak to Mama Cholo and DPSM. Sell this idea, because those people, the PS, DPS, directors, and those deputy director level, if you can get that stratum of people understanding that everything is a project, and they do know this because a lot of them are probably married with children, they've got managed their households well, but they've understand that their lives are a project that they have, a lot of them are highly qualified, but like masters.
Yes, PhDs.
Yeah. But let's take them, like you say, where it's practical stuff on project man. I think In the interim, whilst the child who's born today is growing, this can be a short-term intervention that can work. I absolutely think
I hope HE listens to this and Mama Chelo.
Mama Cholo. She's the head of DPSM.
Yeah. I want us to go back to our effort to penetrate into Africa. Of course, we have AFTA, the Africa Continental Trade Area Agreement. Is it something you've looked at, especially now that we've ratified it? Is this something that you looked at and you find ways and means by which we can actually take advantage of it? Are these sort of things you've applied your mind to?
No, absolutely. So I attend 2 international conferences every year and 1 every other year. So the 2 that I attend every year, one is in Ethiopia, it's called Africa Arise. It's normally around the same time as the Africa Heads of State meeting. It's a Christian-led organization, and Africa Rise is really just, as the name says, is to say, how do we get Africa to arise?
It's like a renaissance.
Yeah, in business and whatever, because in all of these things, talking as a Christian now, they're Christians. The people who are accused of corruption and do that, they're in church on Sundays. So it's not like some aliens who do this. So they're saying, how do we equip people to say, in whatever area you're in, how do you help Africa rise? The other one is in Rwanda, and it's also called Africa Rise, but in their language, local language, called it's called Africa Haguruka, which means Africa Rise in Kinyarwanda. And I attend those because you meet people from all over the continent, business people, ministers in governance, lecturers, and we have different discussions about, firstly, the amount of intra-African trade is like 1/1000th of the amount of Africa trade with China, Africa trade with Europe, Africa trade with the US, and it's like makes no sense. So whilst we're talking about this Agenda 2063 came up, and one of the things that Paul Kagame was really passionate about was really pushing this, and it's now finally happened. What does that mean for me, who has always had an eye for doing business international? It means the barriers to doing trade have been lifted. What is that?
The tariffs.
The tariffs, yes. Because protectionism, whilst at a high level, always seems to be the best way, doesn't work. It's never worked, long term. So now what does that mean? We lament about our population size. You don't have to worry about population anymore, because it means that you can actually you can actually do business across the continent. If your value proposition with whatever it is that you want to trade makes sense, you can literally take that across the continent.
What I read somewhere, I don't know whether this is a negative report or is that there's a lot of protocols attached to the Act, and even then, existing structures, agreements like SACU, COMESA, they're too entrenched, and we may not see even an African visa anytime soon, from what I hear. That's why some people are talking in terms of, is it 2063, which is far in the future. What is your take? Because I'm trying very hard not to be skeptical sometimes when I get this kind of feedback from the market.
Yeah, like I said, the framework is there. The mindset has to change to follow the framework, and I think you invariably agreements like SACU. You wonder, because Zimbabwe is not part of SACU, Zambia is not part of SACU. To say, some people have argued, shouldn't we have started firstly with trying to do regional integration and see how that works? So we are seeing it with Botswana and Namibia introducing, you can cross the border now with your man.
Yeah.
And I believe that this is a test case to see if that goes well. You should be able to see that moving across the regions.
Zambia, I mean, Botswana and Zimbabwe are already talking about
Yes, exactly. So I think you are seeing a lot of that. In West Africa, already the movement there, East Africa, the movement there is already like that. To move from like Rwanda to Kenya to Uganda, like to go from Kenya into Uganda, you just use your ID. So that integration is already there. So I think, there will be skeptics, but I think when you have a leadership that starts putting in place practical steps to show that integration is possible, I think you will start to see a snowball effect and others will follow.
Yeah. So we have to be optimistic.
We have to be.
Yeah. The youngsters are always looking up to people like you, Lopang, to say what are the rules to live by? What are the guideposts for you to be an ethical entrepreneur? As you go back to our main theme of our discussion, what would you say are the non-negotiables to live by, to be able to carry this thing through?
Yeah, I think what guides me, and that's what I always say, I can only talk about myself. What guides me is my faith, because that is my compass, my barometer, that I use at all times to say, here's my center north, A man's character, a woman's character is what you are when you're all by yourself and nobody is watching. So first is working on your character. How do you work on your character so that things are second nature to you? Behaving in a certain way is second nature to you. And for me, it comes from my faith and the principles that I've learned in my faith. So honesty, integrity, being a person of your word, being able to look at someone in the eye and what you say is what you mean, which I know we struggle with a lot here. When my wife moved from South Africa to start working here, one of the things that they wonder about was to say, hey, you must be careful about Botswana. Botswana, you'll have them in a room, you're talking to them, and they'll be nodding, and you think, yeah, I've got them. When you woke up, they'll say, instead of engaging you right and say, but whatever you're presenting, this is nothing new. You're coming with a value proposition that we've had many times. If there's nothing else, go and sharpen your pencil and maybe come back. Instead of not. And that's not a good character trait of anybody. I think people respect somebody who, even if they can say, I'm sure there's some people who say that.
They do say that.
Because normally, why? It's because you're somebody who's upfront and straightforward. And people don't like that. My late father was like that. So I learned those things. To speak your mind, and even if it means you won't be popular for it, in the long run, they will appreciate it. Live your life. Be an example. The life that you live must be exemplary, not your words. So this is whether at home in how I behave with my children, or whether I'm in the workplace. My lifestyle, whether I'm there or not, you can go and say, I was with Lopang, you are saying this and that. I won't say I look with you. Call my kids, but is your father like this at home? I won't say I look with. There should be a common thread that links all of that. How he is at church, how he is at home, how he is in the business. Absolutely. Consistent in who you are. And I think people appreciate that, because I think fewer people are now like that, unfortunately. They're allowing themselves to be shaped by the environment instead of them trying to change the environment that they're in.
I agree with that. All right. One cannot reach the heights that you've reached without suffering some setbacks, even some betrayals. Are there some that you're confident to share with us and to warn us against?
I think setbacks in business, like I said, we expanded quite quickly and grew and diversified, and we got to a point where we were now bleeding money. The good businesses were subsidizing the bad businesses, and it comes from something you mentioned earlier on, that some businessmen are saying he looks at his businesses as his children. That is good to a certain extent, but can also be bad. When you have a child, you never give up on your child.
No, never.
But that's not a good thing for business.
Yeah, I see what you mean,
Because if a business, you give it a certain period of time for it to turn around. If it doesn't turn around by itself, shut it down. So we had a number of businesses that were weighing down the group, And we subsidize, and we still reach the end conclusion of shutting them down. But what they've done is they've severely weakened the other stronger businesses in the group. So, and to come to that point where you don't think of it as a failure for I've shut down a business, but you say this is part of a journey. What lessons have you taken from this journey that you will ensure that going forward you won't repeat or are likely not to repeat in the same manner that you did the first time around? So that has happened, it's been a very, even pre-COVID, so I don't even want to say, there was a period 2 to 3 years, even pre-COVID, where we were struggling as a group because we had these businesses that we were really trying to nurture, and we should have shut the doors much earlier, but sentiment and pride to a certain extent, you don't want to, but failing is actually part of the journey.
Part of succeeding. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So what are the guideposts? How will you know it's time to shut this thing down? Are there any telltale signs?
I think the telltale signs are where if after 6 months you are still being requested to put in the same money that you put in month 1. So it is not decreasing. If somebody says, listen, I need you to handhold me, and you inject the money, and 6 months passes and the money that you're injecting is not even decreasing. Sometimes it's even increasing. Then know that there's something not right here. And what you're being done is you're being promised.
And it may not be enough to change the personnel or to replace those people.
See, replacing personnel and somebody coming in to learn your culture in itself. So if you have deep pockets, maybe you can try that. But if you don't have deep pockets and these businesses are meant to wash their own faces, then I think 6 months is enough time for you really to come to a realistic assessment of whether this, and one of my business partners said he learned this from a very successful Zimbabwean businessman that he had a discussion with. He said, when we acquire, because that was our method, we would acquire, we started only a few, but we would acquire, and then the aim is that we will quickly turn it around and upscale, and that's where the benefit comes from. If you are doing an acquisition, and what you thought before you went in, and with all your due diligence, 6 months,
there's no change. Yeah, that's very interesting. Eh? But the other thing that as Botswana, as businessmen, is to think intergenerationally and to think in terms of creating legacy type of businesses. Is it something that you look into, and if so, what systems are you putting in place for that purpose?
Yeah, I think we're lucky in that our businesses are structured like businesses from the beginning. So regardless of how small it is, you'll find we have a full board of directors, we have shareholders and independent directors in our boards, we have audit committees, we have remuneration committees, we have risk committees. So we are structured in a manner that a corporate would be structured. And I think part of that was helped by the fact that a number of my partners came out or were in the corporate world. So they replicated what they saw working well in the corporate world. So for us, having that structure means that I leave Yarona FM, I leave the business doesn't stop because Dumi is no longer there. The brand is stronger than the founding entrepreneur because it's more about that particular brand and business than the entrepreneur who came up or founded the business. We've always had a mindset that what we are building, we would like Botswana to end up having a shareholding in. So we are building towards getting to a stage where we will list our holdco and bring Botswana into it. Yeah, a public listing.
The whole of it? Or?
No, not the whole of it.
Yeah.
But it won't be like 6% or 7%. I think it will be a significant enough portion to really bring Botswana into it. So because we have that mindset already, it means everything that we're doing, because that is the end goal, We are building systems, knowing what a listed company requires for you to list on the boards.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that really leads to my next question, which is really a question of long-term prospects. Are you able to look at your crystal ball and say, this is what we're looking at for brand Dumi Lopang as distinct from these other entities, or your brand is inseparable, or is it inextricably tied to the brands of these companies?
No, I think that's one thing that I've really tried as much as possible. And I think that's why you see it took so long for me to come on here. Is invariably when you go to a place and you speak, because of the people associate me most with Yarona FM. There's always Dumi, Yarona FM, and then you've got the people on the ground who are running the business, who are the face of the business in terms of the corporate world and whatever. You don't want to be seen to be taking away focus from them, because it should be on them at the moment. So for many years, they tried to interview me, what are you doing? And I really stayed in the background whilst trying to support.
I chased you for 2 years.
Trying to get those who are at the forefront to really, because I want my brand to be separated from our businesses. And why? Because I believe I'm going to transition in the not so distant future from what I'm doing now to another calling, which is in governance.
But
so
still in entrepreneurship space.
No. When I say governments, I mean politics.
Yes. Okay.
Yeah. So I believe it's something I've been passionate about. I was in politics when I was in Zimbabwe as a foreigner. I was the junior town clerk of the Bulawayo Junior City Council.
You never told me that.
When I was at UCT, Mwatwidi Lekauka and Matata Kasinelu were my campaign managers as well there. For Minister of Entertainment. So I've always had a very strong passion and love and calling to go into this governance, political space. And I believe the next transition in my life is me moving into that place.
So it's entirely
of public
possible
service.
That you could become a minister, you could become an MP. That is within the realm of possibilities. That's something you're...
God willing.
Yeah.
God willing. If so, that my aim is to serve in a public service level. And it's not as a civil servant. It's more from a political side. So, it's possible if that whoever, all I can do is try. And hopefully the electorate will see the value in me, and if they make me an MP, if I'm an MP, and then the president is the one who chooses cabinet, they could make me a minister.
The advantage of this approach is that you will be financially independent, and there will be less temptation for you to bend some of your rules or to live by a different set of rules. I like the model. Was that part of the plan from the beginning?
Always. Not that I'm saying I've got a lot of money or whatever, but I think where you go into public service and it's driven by a passion and a love for people and wanting to uplift and help people, it's not because I'm desperate for a paycheck. I think the mentality is completely different. I think it's completely... You see, Red Dada served as an MP for one term, specially elected. Red Charles Tibone, I can't remember whether he did 1 or 2 terms.
At least one.
At least one. Transitioned back into business when he felt he had done his part in that space there. I think that's the beauty of that, is that you are not now desperate by all means possible to not only get in, but to remain, you see. So you're right. It was always well thought out to say, at some stage, do this, you can then transition.
Yeah, you heard it here first, folks. I mean, there Mr. Lopang is telling you that he'll be asking for your vote in some future time.
Yes.
I'll gladly give you my vote.
But I'll be doing this in my hometown.
No problem.
Yeah,
wherever I am, I'll be there. All right. Now, I think this is a part of the... No, before I ask you the ultimate question, the opportunity to ask me a question, let me ask you this. Do you believe... Because I want to go back to the main theme, which is ethics. Do you believe that there can be an entirely 100% ethical government? Do you think that it's within the realm of possibility that we can replicate a Singapore, for instance? And do you think you have a better chance to push us a little bit towards that from within, as a politician as opposed to as a businessman? It's a two-pronged question.
Yes. I think to say, can you have 100% ethical government, I think is to say, can you have 100% ethical human being? Because government is made up of human beings. I think it's possible to have people who are ethical in leadership. And that collective will then create an ethical leadership and an ethical government. But government, remember, then cascades down to the implementers, who are the civil servants, going right down to the people on the ground. I think it can start off at an ethical governance level, and I think it is possible. I think if you have the right rules and systems in place, you can create an environment where you will be afraid to go in there if you are not ethical. You'll be like, this is not for me. The standard that's required here, I do not match up to. Let me stay in my lane. Not one way, like Pro Lumumba once said, that generally in Africa, the politicians you find are the guys who failed, they didn't do well, they have no other option, and then I don't think it's necessarily true for all politicians, but I know it's a generalization, but you are saying generally you find it's not the creme de la creme who go into, but that's what you want. You really want where is the creme de la creme of society who go in and want to uplift those around them as well. Now, can I do that better? Some people say, can you not do that from
that's a second part
without?
Of the question.
Why do you feel you need to be within the system?
And
I just believe that things at a policy level will create greater national effect than me as a businessman trying to create that in my little sphere of influence, which is in my household or in my businesses. So that's why going into governance. And for example, civil servants, especially the senior ones, I'm not sure about junior ones, ministers, you are enjoined to use public health care in Singapore. So if I am worried about my health and I know, I will make sure, and I'm a minister of health or I'm a senior civil servant, I'll make sure that Marina works well. Because I know that if my children, my wife, whatever, my family or I fail myself, I have to go to Marina. But in Africa, you find when there's a problem, most politicians go to Europe or whatever, for health care. Education. If my children have to go to government school, not private school, I'll make sure that in government schools, the standards are the same or even better than in private schools. Our children are taught from a young age, like where my kids go to school, they have a system there which I found unique because based on my age, we didn't have this, But it's a way of learning based on a unit of inquiry. So when you're studying a topic, so if it's weather patterns, it's called a unit of inquiry. And they go and do their own research. They're given certain guidelines. They go and do their own research. In primary school.
It's called what, the Mentor system?
No, I think it's probably the same. This one is called PYP.
PYP.
Yeah. So you go there, the kids come home, they research, they will show different water systems, they'll show deserts, what happens when... And then they go present in front of the class. This is in primary school. The child is being taught research, project management, how to present.
Wow. This is beautiful.
So then you'll find that two children have gone through that is equally as intelligent. One comes to Mogobe to pitch. You are looking to employ someone. One, since the age of 6 or 7 has been taught how to eloquently present themselves and an idea and defend an idea. One who is equally or even more brilliant hasn't been taught that. If they're not lucky enough later on to do Toastmasters or things like that, So if as a civil servant you have to send your kids to a government school, you will make sure that the standards there meet the same or better than private school. So I think there are certain things like that you can put. I can only do that if I'm inside.
Yeah, from within to influence the thinking.
Absolutely.
You can only do it from within.
Absolutely.
Well, as we head towards the end of our conversation, now that you told me you are interested in politics, there's an issue that me and Mr. Khamwanyana talk about a lot on this show, about why we're doing so poorly as Botswana in the happiness index report. Year after year, we're in the bottom 3. And, I say to Rakhangwanyana that nobody has ever asked me about whether I'm happy or not, where are these people taking these numbers from. But it appears that it's generally accepted that we're unhappy as a people. Is that your experience, and what can be done to uplift us from the doldrums of this alleged or so-called unhappiness that keeps coming year after year after year from these studies and the happiness reports?
I struggle a lot to believe some of this unhappiness thing. I've tried before when this measure first came out to just do a little sample. And yes, I know that in terms of standard of living, people would argue things haven't gone in the right trajectory as a country. When my wife moved here, she used to remark about, wow, in your country you don't see things where people are buying second-hand clothes and whatever, like in other markets. In Zambia, you guys find guys on street corners, they'll be selling trousers and whatever. But it's a big thing here. And why? Why is it that people now, the second-hand clothes market is huge? Why is that? In Botswana, growing up, testic rice is what we knew. And when surprise rice came, I was like, whoever is going to buy surprise rice, what's this? Yeah. Hawatalobo speak or whatever. Now people will buy no-name brand rice because that's all they can afford. Why is that? So we were a low-income country, went to middle, and we're aiming for high income. But the trajectory doesn't seem to be moving in the right direction. Why is that the case? So I don't know whether it's true that we're the unhappiest, but I think definitely a lot of people, if you ask them, the way you were living 10 years ago and you compare to now, are you worse off or better off? Your average person will probably say, I'm worse off. My disposable income.
Thanks in part to COVID, I guess.
COVID, yes, but I think even before that, that what 100 pula buys through inflation and many other things gets you much less now. But we need to pull ourselves by the bootstraps. When I go to these other countries, what they've taught me. In Zambia, I think a mortgage is 40%. That's the interest. 40% per annum. A car, I think maybe 48 or something like that.
That's ridiculous.
But people own their own houses. How? They first buy a piece of land. I always love this example. You see a piece of land, and you'll just be there. You don't even know that it's someone's plot. They remove the trees. You wait another 6 months. Another 6 months. So after 2 years, from when you just used to drive past and used to see this bush, 2 years later, you'll see on site. Another year later, you'll see it's at roof level. 6 months later, there's a roof on top. And then 3 years from when you first saw this plot, there's a fully built house. All built cash.
So people are enterprising.
People are enterprising, but because they have been forced to be enterprising because the circumstances didn't allow for anything else. Cheap access to credit in Botswana has been, I believe, our death knell, because we knew you just borrow, you get debt, and most of us, the debt we get is consumption debt, so it's not even the easy personal loans. You can get up to 600,000 unsecured personal loan. If we're getting that, and you know that where I'm going to put it in, the return is greater than unsecured loans are maybe 18% interest per annum, that the return I'll get will be greater than this 18%, then it makes sense. But most of the time it's for consumption. You can't even, person cannot tell you what they did with that money at the end of the day. Can't. So if we are unhappy, it's of our own doing, because there are still many opportunities in Botswana. Do you know you can get a grant for 300,000 pula? A grant, not a loan, from government through Limit, and be able
through what?
Limit, a program called Limit, and be able to irrigate up to 1 hectare. They buy you all the stuff you need for irrigation. They will case a borehole for you.
Within that
the
budget.
new Ispahad, the redone Ispahad. In the past, one of the things was that Hanale Masim, you want to fence, you pay half, government pays half. Grant, not a loan.
The full amount.
No, they will pay half. So if Masima to fence is 50,000, government will pay 25,000 to the hardware store where I've gone, and you don't get that in many other countries.
No, you don't.
So there is still an opportunity, and I think people are waking up. I think the mentality of relying on government handouts, and I think killed us to a certain extent. So I think there is an opportunity that we can turn this unhappiness around.
Is this unhappiness tied with the so-called entitlement mentality that some have lamented?
I think so. Because I do not, like I said, there are tough environments out there. When you've traveled the continent, you'll realize there are people who can say that they're unhappy. And you would understand why. We in Botswana, if
we're unhappy, I think your answer is that if indeed we're unhappy, which you're a bit questioning, it is our own making.
Absolutely.
It is something we can.
The environment, there are so many opportunities. I know people are saying there are no jobs, but, it was always going to be unsustainable for government to continue being the largest employer and absorbing people out of universities. What we need is an enabling environment for SMMEs to grow and thrive. Because SMMEs traditionally all over the world are the largest employers, not government. But here we were used to it. So I believe the policies are there. If we can root out the corruption and whatever, and you see SMMEs like ourselves thriving when we come up with ideas to say, government departments, don't set up your own call centers. Ministry of Education, you are owed now probably 8 billion pula by people who you part sponsored and part grant, who are meant to repay those loans. Paid for their education and are working, but are not repaying their loans. Give us that 8 million debt as the outsourced
part of the government's work.
Sector, not Orinoco.
All of us. Give it to the call centers.
Give it to the call centers. And not the law firms, the call centers. And we will create
because you're
create employment.
Soft collectors, hard collectors.
Yes, you guys are hard collectors. And we will create employment. If in my little call center I employ 200-300 people, if there's a book that size that's spread out and it's performance based, or we give you more guys to collect from as you succeed. We give you more guys. There is a natural incentive for performance. We will employ thousands of young people like what that sector does in other countries.
Yes. Okay, all right. Time for you to hit me with a question, sir. What question do you have for me?
What's the end game, for example, with this podcast and you deciding that you think it's important to give a platform? I mean, there have been other platforms, I believe, where people talk about. What's the end game for Remo?
For the nuggets of...
For Remo Mogobe, what is the end game? Is it not political office? Is it not What's the end game? Why all of this?
Yeah, I've just off the record been given an opportunity to consider the judgeship, and I felt that being a judge would confine me to one space where I'm just listening to cases the whole day, and then maybe spending the night drafting judgments. That would be limiting, and I've always felt there's some sort of calling for me to impact other people. That's why we have this tagline: inspire, enthuse, energize, and empower. So for me, this podcast is potentially one of the best platforms to achieve all that, but with the help of my friends, with the help of my guests, because it's not just about my point of view, but my idea is to promote the culture and spirit of entrepreneurship, and to continue to create an entrepreneurial ecosystem. So in the 3.5 years that we've 3 years that we've done this, 3 years and a bit, it seems to be starting to pay dividends, because I meet youngsters who say that they have pursued certain paths because of what they've been influenced here. I've met youngsters who say they watch and listen to this and they've learned a lot from my guests. So I do not have a particular end game in the sense that this is the end and that's it. But I have in mind a situation as things change in the society. There's now a clear recognition that entrepreneurship is important. When I started the podcast, we didn't have the Ministry of Entrepreneurship, and for the longest time it was believed that entrepreneurs are those for failures, those who could not become doctors or lawyers. So I want the entrepreneurship to reach the pinnacle that it has in developed societies like the States and other parts of the world. And whilst there's no specific end game, but if I can live those 4 objectives, the last of which is to empower 1 or 2 people by inspiring them to think that they can go out there and make a difference, then my role would have been accomplished. That is more or less it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Like you said, I like the word that you use, the word calling as well, because it's something that's greater. I think it's so important. You know, they say in life, the most important day is the day you are born, and then I believe the day that you understand what your purpose is.
Yes.
So I think when you understand that you've been blessed by God, not just to enjoy it, but for you to be a blessing to other people and to impact lives positively, I think life just takes a whole new thing. I mean, like you said, you could be sitting there and we call you, is it your worship?
Yeah, Lordship the whole
your
day.
Lordship the whole day, and you're wearing a white wig.
Yeah.
And you feel important.
Yeah.
But
I'll be achieving something, but it's just too limited.
Yeah.
And on top of that, you can't go to certain places. Judges cannot be seen everywhere. So I like that freedom as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. That's your camera there, and if you can spend the next few minutes just talking to that viewer, leave them with something inspirational, something uplifting, something they can take home.
Yeah. Thank you for having spent this time, watching and listening to Mogobe and I. It's been a true pleasure, having a discussion with somebody who I definitely look up to, especially somebody like me who has an interest in property development, and I've seen his journey. But I think this is what is important, is that as you listen to my journey and other people's journeys when they come onto this platform, I think it's to understand that you have your own unique journey that I believe the Lord has set out for each one of us. And what's important is, I think, to find that journey, that road, that path, which, because it's your unique path, you'll find that, yes, there'll be hurdles along the way, but there'll be something that helps you navigate and get over those hurdles, because it's something that is truly your calling and your passion. Failure is actually something that should encourage you to to dust your bootstraps and stand up and say, I've fallen once, twice, 3 times, but the most important thing is that I rose the 8th time after falling a 7th time. And whilst you're on this journey, I think, do not pursue wealth. I think pursue excellence in everything that you do. And the rewards will come. And that reward might not be what you had hoped for, but I believe you will definitely get an inner gratification and satisfaction that beats even money, because there are a lot of wealthy people who are actually unhappy. So it then tells you that there is more to life. Find out, seek your purpose, and then once you found out what your purpose is, follow that with passion. And I think you will live a gratified life more than anything, and will become a happier society.
Absolutely. All right. Would you mind sharing all your contacts in case somebody wants to carry on with this conversation or to take advantage of some of your services and your businesses?
Yeah, okay. My mobile number is 71319 319. Very easy. I'm on Twitter as Dumi Lopang. I think my kids have put me on Snapchat. I think as Dumi Lopang as well. Yeah. And I'm on Facebook as Dumi Lopang. I don't post much. I generally I follow quite a number of interesting people and reshare.
You prefer to consume than to create the content.
Yes, man. I'll leave that to Mogobe. We can't all want to do the same thing.
That's true. That's very true. Yes. Thank you so much. You've been a wonderful guest.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Great.
Yeah.